Dakota Territory, 1870. Sarah and Emma Mitchell never thought they'd end up alone on the frontier. Their father was supposed to be their protector, but his gambling turned him into something else entirely. Now cast out of their home with nothing but their mother's old Bible, the sisters face a wild land that shows no mercy to the weak. Just when all seems lost, a mysterious cowboy appears in town. They say he's got a past darker than a starless night, but his eyes show kindness when he looks their way. Some folks whisper he's running from something too. But what happens when their father's gambling debts catch up with them, and the sisters discover their mysterious savior might have secrets deadlier than their father's sins? Sarah Mitchell stood before the daguerreotype on the mantel, dustcloth in hand, careful not to smudge the delicate silver surface. The image captured their last moment of true happiness. Mother seated in her best dress, father standing proud behind her chair, Sarah and Emma on either side. Their mother's smile, preserved in silver, seemed to hold all the warmth that had drained from their home since her passing 3 months ago. "Sarah?" Emma's voice drifted in from the kitchen. "The bread's about ready to come out." "Coming." Sarah gave the frame one final polish. At 19, she'd stepped into their mother's role with a determination that surprised even herself. Emma, just 16, handled the changes with equal grace, though Sarah often caught her sister staring at their mother's empty rocking chair when she thought no one was looking. The aroma of fresh bread filled their modest home, a small but well-kept cabin on the outskirts of Silver Creek. Through the window, Sarah could see their father returning from town, his wagon kicking up dust along the rutted road. His shoulders seemed heavier these days, his absences longer. "He's back early," Emma noted, pulling the golden loaf from the oven. Her fingers were quick and sure, already calloused from hard work despite her youth. Sarah watched their father's approach with growing unease. Too early. Town meeting's not supposed to end until sundown. Their father, Thomas Mitchell, had once been the picture of frontier prosperity, a man who could charm investors and break horses with equal skill. But lately, something had changed. The whiskey on his breath grew stronger, his stories about business opportunities more elaborate. He stumbled slightly as he dismounted, catching himself against the wagon wheel. Sarah's heart sank. She'd hoped today would be different. "Emma, finish up in here. I'll help father with the horse." Outside, the Dakota Territory spring air carried the promise of rain. Sarah approached her father cautiously, noting how he fumbled with the horse's harness. "Let me help, Pa." "I can manage," he snapped, then softened. "Sorry, girl, been a long day." Sarah worked the buckles loose while studying her father's face. New lines creased his weathered features, and a familiar flush colored his cheeks. Town meeting end early? Meeting's tomorrow. Was just settling some business matters. The lie hung between them like smoke. Sarah had seen him enter McGregor's saloon that morning, knew he'd been there all day. The same place he'd been spending most of their money lately, though he thought the girls didn't notice. "Made us fresh bread," Sarah offered, changing the subject. "Emma's getting real good at Ma's recipe." Something flickered in Thomas's eyes at the mention of their mother. He reached out and squeezed Sarah's shoulder, his grip a little too tight. "You girls, you're all I got left. You know that, right?" "We know, Pa." Sarah helped him toward the house, pretending not to notice how he leaned on her. "We know." Inside, Emma had set the table with their best cloth, the one their mother had embroidered with wildflowers. 3 plates, 3 cups, the empty chair at the head of the table, a silent reminder of their loss. The daguerreotype watched over them from the mantel, their mother's silver smile now seeming more sad than warm. "Smells like heaven itself in here," Thomas declared, making an effort to straighten his posture. "Just like your Ma used to make." They ate in relative silence, the sisters exchanging glances when their father's hand trembled too much to butter his bread. Sarah noticed his plate was barely touched, another bad sign. When he'd been drinking, food held little appeal. After dinner, Thomas disappeared into his room with a bottle, leaving the sisters to clean up. As they worked, Emma whispered, "I heard things in town today, about Pa." Sarah stilled, a plate halfway to the shelf. What kinds of things? McGregor was talking to Sheriff Wilson. Something about debts. Emma's voice quavered, and I saw Pa's pocket watch was missing. Sarah closed her eyes. That watch had been their grandfather's, a family heirloom Thomas had sworn he'd never part with. We'll figure something out, Em. We always do. Later that night, Sarah sat alone by the dying fire, the daguerreotype in her lap. She traced her mother's face through the glass, wishing she could ask for guidance. The woman in the image seemed so certain, so strong. Nothing like the lost girl she'd left behind. A thud from their father's room made her jump, then silence. Sarah carefully returned the daguerreotype to its place of honor, straightening it just so. Tomorrow would be another day of keeping up appearances, of pretending they were still the family in that silver court moment. But for how long? Outside, storm clouds gathered over the Dakota plains, promising change on the horizon. Sarah found the empty whiskey bottle by the front steps, morning dew beading on its dark glass. She picked it up before Emma could see it, though her sister had long since lost any illusions about their father's habits. The bottle joined a growing collection hidden behind the woodpile, evidence Sarah couldn't bring herself to throw away. "Pa's gone again," Emma called from the barn. "Took the wagon before sunrise." Sarah's stomach tightened. Did he say where? When does he ever? They went about their morning chores in practiced silence, each lost in their own worried thoughts. The spring sun climbed higher, warming the Dakota air, but couldn't chase away the chill that had settled in Sarah's bones. Something felt different about today. By noon, smoke from the smithy clouded the horizon, and the distant sound of hammering carried across the plain. Sarah watched Emma lead their remaining horses to water, noting how her sister's shoulders had begun to hunch under the weight of their situation. A rider appeared on the road from town, moving fast. Sarah recognized Jimmy Watson, the sheriff's son, his horse lathered with sweat. "Sarah! Emma!" He reined up hard at their fence. "You girls better come quick. Your pa's in trouble." Emma dropped the water bucket. "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that's got guns drawn at McGregor's." Sarah's world tilted. "Emma, stay here." "Like hell I will." They mounted their horses bareback, not wasting time with saddles. Jimmy led them at a gallop toward town, dust coating their skirts. Sarah's heart pounded in time with the hoofbeats. McGregor's saloon squatted at the far end of Silver Creek's main street, a weathered two-story testament to frontier vices. A crowd had gathered outside, their murmuring carrying an ugly edge. Sheriff Wilson stood on the boardwalk, his deputy beside him, and there, in the street, stood their father. He swayed slightly, facing down three men Sarah didn't recognize. Trail dust marked them as outsiders, but their guns and hard eyes spoke of experience with frontier justice. "Told you we'd find you, Mitchell," the largest man growled. "Time to settle up." Sarah and Emma dismounted as their father's voice carried thick with whiskey. "Just need more time. Got a big deal coming through." "You've had time. 3 months of it. Now we want our money, or we'll take it in trade." His eyes slid toward the sisters, and Sarah felt her blood run cold. "You leave my girls out of this." Thomas Mitchell's hand dropped to his hip, where his pistol should have been, but he'd sold it weeks ago, along with most everything else of value. The stranger's gun cleared leather with practiced ease. "Your girls might have to learn the hard way about paying their father's debts." Several things happened at once. Emma screamed. Sheriff Wilson stepped forward, and from the shadows of the livery stable, a figure Sarah hadn't noticed before made his move. He seemed to materialize from the darkness, a tall man in a black duster. His movement was liquid grace as he stepped between Thomas and the gunman. The stranger's pistol never wavered, but something in his stance changed. "3 armed men against 1 drunk," the newcomer drawled, his voice soft but carrying. "Seems a mite uneven. This ain't your business, friend." "Maybe not." The man in black shifted slightly, and suddenly his own gun was visible, held loose but ready at his side. But I've got a peculiar notion about fairness. Why don't we discuss this civilized-like? The standoff stretched, hot and tight as a fiddle string. Sarah held her breath, one arm around Emma's trembling shoulders. Their father stood forgotten, a pitiful figure swaying in the dust. Finally, the lead gunman spat. "Ain't worth dying over. Mitchell, you've got 1 week. 1 week to pay every cent or we'll be back, and no black-clad stranger's going to stop us then." They mounted up and rode out, their horses' hooves throwing dirt on the gathered crowd. As they disappeared, Sarah caught her first clear look at their unexpected savior. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 30, with eyes that had seen too much and a face that gave nothing away. Those eyes met hers for just a moment, and Sarah felt something shift in her world, like the ground itself had tilted beneath her feet. Then he was gone, melting back into the shadows as if he'd never been there at all. Left behind was only their father's empty whiskey bottle, rolling sadly in the dust of the street. The eviction notice lay on their kitchen table like a snake coiled to strike. Sarah read it for the 10th time, the formal language burning itself into her memory. Their father hadn't just gambled away their money, he'd sold their home rights to cover his debts. How could he? Emma's voice cracked. She stood at the window, watching the last light fade from the Dakota sky. How could he do this to us? Sarah had no answer. Their father hadn't come home after the confrontation in town. Sheriff Wilson had searched the usual places, but Thomas Mitchell had vanished like morning mist. "We have until sunrise," Sarah said, forcing herself to be practical. "We should pack what we can carry." They moved through the cabin like ghosts, gathering essentials. Their mother's Bible went into Sarah's satchel, along with the few coins they'd managed to save. Emma folded their best dresses, though they both knew fine clothes would be useless in whatever lay ahead. A knock at the door made them both jump. Sarah's hand went to the kitchen knife at her belt, their father's pistol long since pawned, before Sheriff Wilson's voice called out, "Girls, need to talk to you." He stood awkwardly on their porch, hat in hands. Behind him, the first stars pricked the darkening sky. "Found your pa's wagon," he said without preamble. "Abandoned out by Crow Creek, no sign of him." Emma made a small, hurt sound. Sarah's fingers dug into the doorframe. "Any word from the men he owes?" she asked. "They're staying at McGregor's. Way I hear it, your pa sold them this property rights legal and proper." He shifted uncomfortably. "I'm sorry, girls. Ain't nothing I can do." Sarah nodded tight-lipped. She'd expected as much. "My Martha said you could—" "Thank you, Sheriff." Sarah cut him off. She couldn't bear charity. Not yet. "We'll manage." After he left, the sisters continued packing by lamplight. Every object they touched held memories. Their mother's lace tablecloth, their father's old ledger books filled with increasingly desperate calculations, the family photographs they couldn't bear to leave behind. "Sarah!" Emma's voice was small in the growing darkness. "What are we going to do?" Before Sarah could answer, hoofbeats approached. Her heart leaped. Their father returning, but the rider passed without slowing. Through the window, she caught a glimpse of a black duster disappearing into the night. "We're going to survive," Sarah said finally, "like Ma taught us." They worked until midnight, sorting through their lives, deciding what to keep and what to leave behind. The home that had sheltered them since childhood slowly emptied, their belongings condensed into 2 bags and a small cart they could pull. Themselves, dawn came too soon. They stood in the yard, watching the sun rise over their lost home. The new owners would arrive any minute. "Should we wait?" Emma asked. "In case, Pa?" Sarah shook her head. Their father had made his choice. They needed to make theirs. They set out on foot, pulling their cart along the rutted road toward town. The morning air bit cold through their shawls, and their boots made for indoor work, already pinched with each step. The town stirred to life around them as they passed. Shopkeepers opening their doors paused to stare. Women whispered behind their hands. Even the children fell silent, watching the Mitchell sisters fall from grace. "Hold your head high," Sarah whispered to Emma. "We're still our mother's daughters." They made it to the edge of town before Emma's strength gave out. They sat beside their cart in the shelter of an old oak tree. sharing a piece of bread that might be their last real meal for a while. "We could try the church," Emma suggested half-heartedly. "Reverend Matthews takes his guidance from McGregor these days." Sarah's voice was bitter. The saloon owner's influence ran deep in Silver Creek. A shadow fell across them. Sarah looked up, expecting mockery or unwanted pity. Instead, she met the steady gaze of the stranger in the black duster. He studied them for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Without a word, he placed a small bundle beside their cart and walked away. Inside, they found jerky, hard bread, and a handful of bullets that would fit their father's pawned pistol, if they ever saw it again. The eviction notice crumpled in Sarah's pocket as she watched him disappear into the crowd. She wondered if he knew what it felt like to lose everything, to watch your world crumble like sand through your fingers. Something in his eyes made her think he did. The abandoned church loomed against the darkening sky, its weathered spire reaching toward storm clouds like a gnarled finger. Sarah tested the back door's hinges, relieved when they gave way with minimal protest. Inside, dust motes danced in, what little daylight filtered through grimy windows. "It's just for tonight," she assured Emma, trying to sound confident, "until we figure something else out." Emma nodded weakly, her face flushed with fever. The past 3 days of sleeping. Rough had taken their toll, and the spring nights were still bitter cold. They'd traded their mother's lace tablecloth for blankets, but it hadn't been enough. Sarah helped her sister settle onto their makeshift bed of old hymnal cushions. As she unpacked their dwindling supplies, her hand brushed against their mother's recipe book, its leather cover worn smooth by years of use. She pulled it out, seeking comfort in its familiar weight. "Ma's beef stew," Emma murmured, seeing the book. Remember how she'd make it every Sunday? Sarah opened the book, letting memories wash over her. Their mother's elegant handwriting filled the pages, not just with recipes, but with marginal notes about life, love, and survival. Something fluttered to the floor, a folded paper she'd never noticed before. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was her mother's distinctive script. "My dearest girls, if you're reading this, times have grown desperate. I've tried to prepare for such a day. Look beneath the loose floorboard under my rocking chair. I love you both. Trust in each other. Ma." Sarah's heart pounded. "Em, did you know about this?" Emma shook her head, then winced at the movement. "Rest," Sarah ordered. "I'll be back before dark." The walk to their old home felt endless. Sarah kept to the shadows, avoiding the main streets where gossip about the Mitchell sisters had become a favorite pastime. When she reached the house, she crept around back, grateful to find the window to their mother's sewing room still loose in its frame. The rocking chair was gone, sold like everything else, but Sarah found the loose board easily enough. Inside the small cavity, wrapped in oilcloth, she discovered a pouch containing $20 and a small notebook filled with names, dates, and what looked like business contacts in nearby towns. "Oh, Ma," Sarah whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "You knew this might happen." A floorboard creaked behind her. Sarah whirled, clutching her finds to her chest, to find the stranger in the black duster standing in the doorway. For a long moment, they stared at each other. "Folks usually don't break into their own homes," he said finally, his voice low and even. "It's not our home anymore." Sarah lifted her chin. "Are you going to turn me in?" He studied her, then glanced at the recipe book she'd dropped in her surprise. Something softened in his expression. "Your sister's sick." It wasn't a question, but Sarah nodded anyway. "Doc Jenkins does his rounds at sunset. Tends to leave his back door unlocked while he's out." He turned to go, then paused. "Might want to check your mother's book more carefully. Women like her often kept more than recipes between those pages." He was gone before Sarah could respond. She quickly examined the book again, finding several bills pressed between its pages, along with notes about wild herbs and their medicinal properties. When she returned to the church, Emma's fever had worsened. Sarah wet a cloth with their precious drinking water and laid it on her sister's forehead. "Found something interesting?" Emma asked weakly, seeing the book in Sarah's lap. "Ma left. As more than recipes, Sarah managed a smile. She left us a way forward. That night, as Emma slept fitfully, Sarah read their mother's notes by candlelight. Between instructions for bread and preserves, she found wisdom about surviving hard times, about finding strength in adversity. And in the margin of a page about honey cakes, a single line stood out. "Remember, my loves, sometimes help comes from unexpected places. The trick is being brave enough to accept it." Sarah thought of the stranger's words about Doc Jenkins' door. Outside, thunder rolled across the plains, promising more storms to come. But for the first time since their world had crumbled, she felt a flicker of real hope. She just prayed it would be enough to see them through what lay ahead. Sarah slipped into the sheriff's office while Deputy Peters was distracted by a dispute outside the general store. Her mother's notebook had mentioned something about checking official notices, and Sarah needed any information she could find about their father's whereabouts. As she rifled through the stack of wanted posters on the deputy's desk, a familiar face stopped her cold. The sketch wasn't perfect, but there was no mistaking those eyes. James Carter, the poster read, "Wanted for questioning in Wyoming territory." The charges were smudged, but the reward was clear, $500 dead or alive. The date caught her attention, 3 years old. Below the sketch, someone had written, "Resolved," in faded ink. Sarah's fingers traced the image, remembering how those same eyes had watched her at her lowest moments, offering silent support. "Found something interesting?" She jumped at his voice. Carter stood in the doorway, blocking her escape route. In daylight, she could see the small scars on his hands, the way he carried himself like a man ready for trouble. "Why are you helping us?" Sarah demanded, holding up the poster. He stepped inside, closing the door. "That's an old story. I need to know if I can trust you. Emma's sick, we're almost out of money," and she stopped, realizing she was revealing too much. Carter took the poster, studied it for a moment, then crumpled it. "Was accused of something I didn't do. Proved it. End of story. Then why do? You hide in shadows? Why all the mystery?" "Same reason you're in here going through official papers." He met her gaze steadily. "Sometimes the past doesn't stay where you leave it." Outside, they could hear Deputy Peters returning. Carter moved to the window, opened it smoothly. "Coming?" Sarah hesitated only a moment before following him out. They walked in silence through the back alleys of Silver Creek, keeping to the shadows out of shared habit. "I have a ranch," he said finally. 10 miles north. Need help with the spring calving." Sarah stopped. "Are you offering us work? Offering you a chance?" He turned to face her. "Got a cabin out there, sits empty. Could use someone who knows their way around a kitchen, someone who can keep books." "And Emma? Heard she's good with horses. Got plenty that need breaking." Sarah studied him, thinking of the wanted poster, of his timely appearances, of her mother's words about help from unexpected places. "Why us?" "Because 12 years ago someone gave me a chance when I needed one." He pulled something from his coat, a proper contract, written in careful legal script. "Everything official, witnessed by the bank. You'll earn your way, no. Charity." Sarah took the contract, saw it offered fair wages and the cabin's use. "I need to talk to Emma." He nodded. "I'll be at the livery at dawn. Take the night to decide." As he turned to go, Sarah called out, "The man in Wyoming. Did you kill him?" Carter paused. "No, but I would have if he'd hurt my family." His eyes met hers. "Man's got a right to protect what's his." Later, in the church's dusty sanctuary, Sarah showed Emma the contract while changing her fever-damp bandages. "Sounds too good to be true," Emma said weakly. "Maybe." Sarah laid out the facts they knew. Carter's mysterious past, his consistent help, the wanted poster that suggested both danger and redemption. "But we're running out of options." Emma pushed herself up on her elbows. "You saw Ma's book. People talk about him in town. They say his ranch is the most successful in the territory. They say he's fair to his workers. They also say he's dangerous. So is starving." Emma coughed, then managed a wan smile. Besides, did you see his horses when he rode past yesterday? Beautiful animals. Sarah laughed despite herself. Trust Emma to notice the horses first. She pulled out their mother's recipe book, opened to the page about taking chances. Ma would want us to be smart, she said carefully, but she'd also want us to be brave. Thunder rolled outside, promising another storm. Emma shivered and Sarah tucked their threadbare blanket tighter around her. We've got nothing left to lose, Emma whispered. Sarah thought of Carter's eyes when he spoke of protecting family, of the careful way he'd drawn up a proper contract instead of just offering charity. Perhaps, she realized, they had more to gain than they had to lose. Get some rest, she told Emma. We're riding out at dawn. The ranch ledger sat open on the cabin's small table, its neat columns telling a story of careful stewardship and honest profit. Sarah ran her finger down the most recent entries, impressed despite herself. Every transaction was meticulously recorded, from the smallest purchase of nails to the largest cattle sale. Everything to your satisfaction? Carter stood in the doorway, his shadow stretching across the wooden floor. 2 weeks had passed since they'd arrived at the Circle C. And Sarah was still getting used to seeing him in broad daylight instead of lurking in shadows. It's thorough, she admitted. More than I expected. Expected a outlaw's books to be messier. The hint of amusement in his voice made her cheeks warm. Maybe. He stepped inside, hanging his hat on a peg. The morning sun caught the silver, threading in his black coat, and for a moment Sarah saw him as others might, imposing, dangerous. Then he smiled and the illusion broke. Previous bookkeeper quit last spring. Been doing my best, but numbers ain't my strong suit. Sarah turned back to the ledger, noting his careful attempts to maintain the previous keeper's system. I can help with that. Ma taught us both accounting and ciphering. Smart woman, your Ma. Through the open window they could hear Emma's clear voice drifting from the corral where she worked with a young mare. Her fever had broken days ago, and the fresh air and good food had brought color back to her cheeks. She's got a way with them, Carter observed. Horses sense kindness. Emma's always been gentle. Sarah smiled, remembering her sister as a child, nursing injured birds and stray cats. But strong too. Runs in the family, I reckon. Their eyes met briefly before Sarah looked away, flustered by the warmth in his gaze. She focused on the ledger instead, noting how the ranch's prosperity had grown steadily over the past 3 years. You've built something real here, she said quietly. Trying to. He moved closer, pointing to an entry. That's the breeding program Emma's been asking about, thinking of expanding it, if she's interested in taking charge. Sarah's head snapped up. You'd trust her with that? Trust what I see. She's got the touch and the brains to back it. He paused. Same as you with these books. A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window they watched Emma successfully mount the mare she'd been gentling. The horse pranced nervously, but didn't buck, responding to Emma's quiet confidence. Yes! Emma's triumphant cry carried across the yard. Other ranch hands paused in their work to watch, several nodding in approval. Ranch needs people like you two, Carter said. People who build things up instead of tearing them down. Sarah thought of their father, of how he'd destroyed their family's legacy piece by piece. The ledger under her hands represented the opposite. Careful growth, honest work, a future being built dollar by dollar. I found something else in here, she said carefully, turning to a dog-eared page. Supply runs to the Indian reservation, medical supplies, food. That gonna be a problem? No. She met his eyes steadily. Just explains some things. He nodded, understanding what she didn't say, that a man who helped others might also help two stranded sisters. Sometimes doing right ain't popular, doesn't make it wrong. A ranch hand appeared at the door. Boss, cavalry patrols coming up the road. Carter straightened, his expression shuddering. Regular patrol. No, sir. Lieutenant Bradford himself. Sarah saw Carter's hand drift unconsciously toward his gun before he caught himself. Sarah, mind taking those books to your cabin for now? Might want to stay there till they ride on. She gathered the ledger, understanding. A man with a past like his probably preferred to keep his distance from military authority. But as she hurried across the yard, she noticed something else, how the other ranch hands casually positioned themselves between the approaching patrol and the Indian supply wagons being loaded behind the barn. In her cabin, Sarah added her own neat column to the ledger, recording the morning's transactions. Through her window, she could see Carter greeting the cavalry officers with perfect calm, every inch the successful rancher. Emma continued working. With her horses, part of the ranch's legitimate business. The ledger told the truth of the Circle C ranch, Sarah realized. But like the man who owned it, that truth had layers. She carefully noted the supply wagon's contents under miscellaneous expenses and smiled. Sometimes the cleanest books held the most interesting stories. The Army Medal caught the lamplight, its brass surface dulled by age and hard use. Sarah found it while cleaning Carter's office, tucked away in a drawer, wrapped in an old handkerchief, along with discharge papers dated 1866. Captain James Carter, 2nd Cavalry Regiment, honorable discharge with commendation for valor. She was still holding it when she heard the commotion outside. Emma's voice, raised in alarm. "Sarah, he's here!" Her heart stopped. Through the window she saw their father stumbling toward the main house, his clothes ragged, his face gaunt from weeks of hard living. Emma stood frozen by the corral, gripping a fence post like it could anchor her against the storm of emotions Sarah saw crossing her face. "Girls!" Thomas Mitchell's voice carried across the yard, slurred but demanding. "Your own father comes to find you, and this is the welcome he gets." Sarah tucked the medal into her pocket without thinking and hurried outside. The evening sun cast long shadows across the ranch yard, and the spring wind carried the scent of coming rain. Ranch hands paused in their work, watching warily. "Pa." Sarah kept her voice steady, positioning herself between him and Emma. "You're drunk." "Ain't drunk. Just need to talk to my girls." He swayed slightly. "Heard you'd taken up here. With him." The last word dripped with insinuation. "Mr. Carter gave us honest work," Emma said, her voice smaller than Sarah liked. "More than you did." Thomas's face darkened. "Watch your mouth, girl. I'm still your father. A father who sold our home." Sarah's anger, banked for weeks, flared hot. "Who left us with nothing. Had no choice, but I got it figured now." He fumbled in his coat, produced a crumpled paper. "Got a stake in a mine up north. Real silver this time. Just need a little capital to—" "No." Sarah's voice cracked like a whip. "Now you listen here." He took a step forward, hand raised. The distinctive sound of a gun being cocked froze him mid-step. Carter stood in the barn doorway, his revolver held loose but ready. "Think you should leave," Carter said quietly. Thomas squinted at him. "This ain't your business, mister. These girls work for me. Makes it my business. They're my daughters." "Not anymore." Emma's voice surprised them all. She'd moved to stand beside Sarah, her spine straight. "You gave up that right." Their father's face twisted. "That how it is? Throwing in with some killer with a price on his head?" Sarah felt the weight of Carter's medal in her pocket. Better a man who protects what's his than one who sells it. "You don't know him. Ask him about Wyoming territory. Ask him about—" "I know what he did in Wyoming," Sarah cut him off, "and I know what you did here." She pulled out the medal, let it catch the light. "I also know what kind of man earns this." Carter's eyes narrowed at the sight of the medal, but he didn't lower his gun. Thomas looked between them, reality finally penetrating his alcoholic haze. His daughters stood together, stronger than he'd ever seen them. Behind them, ranch hands had casually drifted closer, hands near weapons. "Time to go, Mr. Mitchell," Carter said softly. "Don't come back without an invitation." For a moment, Sarah thought their father would fight. Then his shoulders slumped, and he seemed to age 10 years in an instant. "Just wanted to make things right," he mumbled. "Then stay gone," Emma said. "That's the only right thing left to do." They watched him shuffle away down the road, a broken man revealed in the dying light. When he was out of sight, Carter holstered his gun and walked over to Sarah. "Found that in my drawer, did you?" She held out the medal. Was cleaning. I'm sorry. He took it, turned it over in his hands. Long time ago. Different man. The man who earned this seems pretty similar to the one standing here, Sarah said softly. Protecting people who need it. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Keep my secrets to you. You keep ours. Emma touched Sarah's arm. He'll be back, won't he? Probably, Carter said. Men like that usually are. Sarah watched the road where their father had disappeared, feeling the weight of the past and the promise of the future pulling at her heart. Then we'll be ready. That night, as thunder rolled across the plains, Sarah saw Carter return the medal to its drawer, but he left it unwrapped this time, catching lamplight like a promise kept. Emma's horse training journal lay open on the corral fence, its pages fluttering in the warm June breeze. Sarah paused in her walk to the main house to read her sister's careful notes. Storm cloud, grey mare, day 15. Finally accepting the saddle without tension. Key is to approach from her left side, speaking softly. She has a tell before spooking, right ear twitches twice. Found if I sing Ma's old lullaby, she settles right down. The sound of hoofbeats drew Sarah's attention. Emma cantered past on, a sleek black stallion, her face bright with joy. She'd traded her old dress for proper riding clothes, and she sat the horse like she'd been born to it. That's the third one this week, Carter said, materializing beside Sarah. She'd gotten used to his quiet approaches. Most handlers need a month to gentle a horse like that. She does it in days. Sarah smiled with pride. Emma always did have a way about her. They watched as Emma put the stallion through its paces. The horse responded to her subtle cues, like a dance partner, moving with fluid grace. Got buyers coming from Colorado next week, Carter mentioned. Words getting around. About our horses. Our horses? Sarah raised an eyebrow. Well, way I see it, Emma's turned this into a proper breeding operation. Makes her a partner, not just a hand. Sarah's heart swelled. 2 months ago, they'd been homeless and desperate. Now Emma was building a reputation that would secure her future. Emma dismounted, leading the stallion to the water trough. She pulled out her journal, making quick notes while the horse drank. Sarah, come see what I wrote about lightning here. I think I figured out a new training technique. Sarah joined her sister at the fence, noting how Emma's earlier timidity had vanished. The journal was filled with detailed observations, careful diagrams, and training schedules that showed both practical knowledge and innovation. See here? Emma pointed to a sketch. If you approach them this way, it mimics how their mothers would guide them. Makes the whole process gentler. Smart, Carter said, studying the diagram. Might have to copy this for the other handlers. Emma beamed at the praise. I was thinking, if we bred Stormcloud with that paint stallion that came in last week. She trailed off as a wagon approached the ranch, dust rising behind it. Sarah recognized Jimmy Watson from town driving fast. Mr. Carter, Jimmy called out. Those men are back, the ones who were after Mr. Mitchell. They're asking questions in town about the ranch. Sarah felt Carter tense beside her. Emma clutched, her journal tighter. They say anything specific? Carter's voice was calm, but Sarah heard the steel beneath it. Wanting to know about your operation, about the girls. Jimmy shifted uncomfortably. They were at the land office too, looking at property records. Carter nodded slowly. Thanks for the warning, Jimmy. Tell your pa I'll be in town tomorrow to discuss it. After Jimmy left, they stood in troubled silence. Finally, Emma spoke. Up. We're not leaving. Her voice was firm. This is our home now. Those men don't get to take another home from us. Sarah watched Carter's expression soften as he looked at Emma. No longer the scared girl who'd arrived at his ranch, but a confident young woman who knew her worth. Nobody's taking anything, he said. Got too much built here to walk away from. Emma nodded and returned to her horses, but Sarah lingered. Those men are dangerous, James. His eyes met hers at the use of his first name. So am I, when needed. She touched his arm lightly. We know. We've seen your ledger, remember? The supplies you send to people in need? The second chances you give folks. She smiled. The way you watch out for two stubborn sisters who were too proud to ask for help? He covered her hand with his own, rough calluses against her softer skin. Ain't pride to want to stand on your own feet. Ain't weakness either, letting people help you do it. Later that evening, Sarah found Emma adding more notes to her journal by lamplight. Looking over her shoulder, she saw her sister had written, "Some horses, like some people, just need someone to believe in them. Trust has to be earned, but once given, it can make miracles happen. Ma knew that. Now I do too." Sarah hugged her sister from behind, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and hay that now clung to Emma's clothes. Outside, a chorus of night. Birds called to each other across the darkening plains. Their song, like everything else about the ranch, felt like home. The map lay spread across Carter's desk, its edges curling from water damage, ink bleeding at the corners. Sarah traced the route they'd marked for moving the horse herd, now threatened by the approaching storm. Telegraph from Cheyenne says, "It's the worst system they've seen in years," Carter said, pointing to the dark clouds gathering on the horizon. "Going to hit us dead on." Emma burst in, her hair wild from the rising wind. "Lightning's already spooking the horses. If we don't move them now—" A thunderclap cut her off, so close it rattled the windows. Carter rolled up the map, tucking it into his coat. "Sarah, you and Emma take the west pasture herd to the Box Canyon. High ground, natural shelter," he strapped on his gun belt. "I'll lead the others to the north draw." "The canyon's on Mitchell gang territory," Sarah protested. "If they're watching, rather face them than lose 30 horses to lightning." His eyes met hers. "You remember the way?" Sarah nodded. They'd studied the map together just yesterday, before the weather turned, before word came that their father's old associates were closing in. Outside, the air crackled with electricity. Emma was already mounted, leading 2 saddled horses. The herd milled nervously as thunder rolled across the darkening sky. "Stay together," Carter ordered, swinging onto his black stallion. "Whatever happens, stay together." They split up, Emma and Sarah driving their portion of the herd west, while Carter led the rest north. The first heavy drops began to fall as they crossed the creek, swollen from spring rains. "There!" Emma pointed to movement on the ridge above them. "Riders!" Sarah squinted through the rain. 3 mounted figures watched their progress, too distant to identify. Her hand went to the revolver Carter had insisted she carry. "Keep moving!" she called to Emma. "Canyon's only 2 miles ahead." The storm hit full force. Lightning split the sky, thunder crashed overhead, and the rain became a stinging deluge. The horses bunched tighter, driven by instinct toward the shelter of the canyon walls. Sarah pulled out the map, but the rain had soaked through Carter's coat. The ink ran in streaks, turning landmarks into dark smudges. She could barely make out the canyon entrance marked in Carter's careful hand. Movement again on the ridge. The riders were paralleling their course. "Emma!" Sarah shouted over the storm. "Remember that gut feeling Ma always talked about? I've got it bad." Emma nodded grimly. She'd grown up fast these past months, learning to trust those same instincts their mother had relied on. They drove the horses harder, racing the storm and their shadowy pursuers. The canyon entrance appeared. Through the rain, a narrow cut between towering walls. Safe haven or perfect trap? Sarah studied the deteriorating map one last time. There, barely visible through the bleeding ink, a second path marked with a faint X. A back way out, if things went wrong. The herd thundered into the canyon just as a massive lightning bolt turned night to day. In that flash, Sarah saw their pursuers clearly. Their father wasn't among them, but she recognized one of the men from the saloon confrontation months ago. "Emma, back trail, now!" They split the herd, driving half up the hidden path while the rest continued deeper into the canyon. The pursuers would have to choose, the horses or the sisters. Thunder crashed again. Through the din, Sarah heard hoofbeats approaching fast. She turned, gun ready, and nearly shot Carter. "Spotted them on the ridge!" he shouted, rain streaming down his face. "And couldn't leave you out here alone. The horses! Jake's got them safe. This is more important." The map was pulp in Sarah's pocket now, but its lessons remained. They drove their portion of the herd higher, using the storm's fury as cover. Below, they heard shouts of frustration as their pursuers found only half their quarry. They emerged onto high ground as the storm began to pass. Lightning still flickered in the distance, illuminating the dramatic landscape. The horses, sensing safety, began to calm. Emma slipped from her saddle, legs shaking. That was too close. "Not over yet," Carter warned, scanning the horizon. "They'll be back." Sarah pulled out the ruined map. The ink had run so badly it looked like blood seeping through paper. "We're going to need a new map. Got it all up here?" Carter tapped his temple. Some things you don't need paper to remember. Like the way he'd chosen them over the horses, Sarah thought. Like the way he'd known exactly where to find them. The storm rolled east, leaving behind air so clean it hurt to breathe. They sat their horses on the ridgeline, watching dawn break over their hard-won sanctuary. For now, they were safe. For now, they were together. But the map's ruin felt like an omen. The clear trails they'd marked were gone, washed away like so many careful plans. Whatever came next, they'd have to find their own way. The forged deed hit Carter's desk like a thunderclap on a clear day. Sarah stared at the document, her trained bookkeeper's eye catching the inconsistencies even as her heart sank at her father's signature at the bottom. Property transfer, dated. 6 months ago, Thomas Mitchell announced, swaying only slightly. He looked better than last time, clean-shaven, newly dressed. Someone had invested in making him presentable. "Gives me partial ownership of the Circle C Ranch." Carter picked up the deed, his face unreadable. "Interesting, considering I was in Cheyenne that day, not in Silver Creek where this claims I signed." "Papers are papers." Thomas shrugged, but his eyes were sharp despite the whiskey on his breath. "My associates are prepared to pursue this legally." Sarah's mind raced. 6 months ago, they'd barely known Carter existed, but she recognized the names of the witnesses on the deed. The same men who'd chased them through the storm. Emma stood in the doorway, white-faced. "How could you? Now, girl, this is business." Thomas tried to smile, but it came out wrong. "Just trying to secure my daughter's future. By stealing another man's ranch?" Sarah's voice shook with fury. "By forging his name? Ain't stealing if the law says it's mine." Their father's fake charm slipped, revealing something harder beneath. "Your mother would have wanted you girls provided for." "Don't you dare speak of Ma." Emma's quiet words cut like a knife. "She'd be ashamed to see what you've become." Carter hadn't moved, hadn't raised his voice. He studied the deed with the same careful attention he gave his ledgers. "Your associates," he said finally. "They're waiting in town." Thomas nodded, triumphant. "Got themselves a real lawyer, too. Harvard-educated. Must be expensive." Carter's voice was mild. "Wonder where men like that got such an interest in a small ranch like this." Sarah caught his meaning. Someone was backing her father. Someone with resources and a grudge. The forged deed was just the opening move in a bigger game. "Don't matter where the money comes from," Thomas said. "What matters is I'm part owner now. Means my girls can stay, proper and legal-like. We're not your girls anymore." Sarah met his eyes steadily. "And we don't need you to secure our future. We've done that ourselves." Thunder rumbled in the distance, another storm approaching, or maybe it was just the blood pounding in Sarah's ears as she watched her father's face darken. "Ungrateful brats." The mask of paternal concern slipped entirely. "Think you're better than your own blood? Think this killer's going to take care of you? Wait till everyone hears what really happened in Wyoming." Carter moved so fast Sarah barely saw it. One moment he was behind his desk. The next he had Thomas Mitchell pinned against the wall, forearm across his throat. "Think real careful about your next words," Carter said softly. "Might be your last." "James," Sarah touched his arm. "He's not worth it." Carter held Thomas a moment longer, then stepped back. "Get off my property." "Our property," Thomas wheezed, straightening his collar. "Papers say." "Papers can lie." Carter tossed the forged deed into the fireplace. "People, too. Question is, who's backing you? Who wants this ranch bad enough to buy a drunk's loyalty? Thomas Mitchell's face went slack. With fear for just a moment, whatever he saw in Carter's eyes sent him stumbling toward the door. "This ain't over," he called from the safety of his horse. "Law's coming for you, Carter, all of you." They watched him ride away, his horse weaving slightly despite its rider's new clothes. "He'll be back," Emma said quietly, "with that lawyer." "Let him come." Carter turned to Sarah. "Your father's right about one thing. Papers are important. Good thing we've got ourselves a fine bookkeeper who knows how to prove what's real and what ain't." Sarah thought of the ranch ledger, the careful records she'd kept. The deed's a forgery, but fighting it will mean attention. Questions about your past. Some things are worth the risk. His hand found hers, calluses rough against her palm. Some people too. Emma cleared her throat. "I'll check on the horses. Storm's coming." But she smiled as she left. And Sarah felt hope rise despite everything. Their father had taught them what a man's word was worth, nothing, but Carter showed them daily what a man's actions meant. The forged deed burned to ash in the fireplace, but its threat lingered like smoke. The coming storm wouldn't just bring rain, it would bring men with papers and lawyers and questions. Sarah squeezed Carter's hand, feeling his quiet strength. Let them come. Some things were worth fighting for. The stack of legal documents covered the kitchen table like fallen leaves, each one telling part of the Circle C Ranch's story. Sarah had spent days organizing them: land grants, bills of sale, cattle contracts, and letters of incorporation, all bearing James Carter's signature, his real signature. "Found another one," Emma called from the study. She emerged with a dusty folder. "Letters from the army about Carter's discharge and land grant. Look at the dates." Sarah compared them to the forged deed. "Perfect. These prove he was still in service when our father claims they made their deal." Carter watched from the doorway as the sisters worked. He'd been quiet since the lawyer arrived in town, letting them take the lead in building their defense. Now, Sarah understood why. They weren't just protecting his ranch, they were protecting their home. "Mr. Carter?" Jimmy Watson rode into the yard, kicking up dust. "They're coming, whole group of them." Through the window, Sarah saw the approaching party, their father, the Harvard lawyer in his city suit, and three hard-eyed men she recognized. From the storm, behind them rode Sheriff Wilson, looking uncomfortable. "Ready?" Carter asked softly. Sarah squared her shoulders. "Been ready since they ran us off our first home." They met their visitors on the porch. Emma stood on Carter's, left Sarah on his right, presenting a united front. The lawyer dismounted first, sweating in his Eastern wool suit. "Mr. Carter," he tipped his hat, "I'm Frederick Chapman, representing Mr. Mitchell's interests in this property dispute." "Ain't much to dispute," Carter replied evenly. Chapman pulled out the forged deed, or rather, a copy of it. "This document clearly shows fraud." Sarah stepped forward with their own papers. "We can prove it." She laid out their evidence methodically, like balancing the ranch's books. Carter's army records showing his location, bank drafts with his genuine signature for comparison, letters from the Territory Land Office confirming his original purchase. "Additionally," she continued, "we have testimony from the bank manager about when Mr. Carter actually acquired the ranch, and records of every improvement made since." The lawyer frowned at the documents. Behind him, their father's face had gone purple with rage. "Gonna let a woman speak for you, Carter?" One of the hard-eyed men called out. "Smart man knows when to listen to someone who knows what they're talking about." Carter's voice carried clearly. "Smarter man knows when he's beaten." Chapman studied the army records carefully. "These present a problem for our claim." "Present more than that," Sheriff Wilson spoke up. "Forgery's a serious crime in this territory." Thomas Mitchell's composure cracked. "Now wait just a minute." "Ain't waiting anymore." Carter's quiet words stopped him cold. "You tried running these girls off their home once before. Didn't work then, won't work now." Sarah pulled out one final document. The ranch's new incorporation. Papers, dated the previous week. The Circle C is now legally owned in partnership. Mr. Carter, myself, and my sister Emma are all equal shareholders." She saw the moment her father understood. They weren't just defending Carter's ranch, they were defending their own property. Everything he'd tried to steal from them, they'd earned honestly. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Mitchell, given this new evidence, I must advise—" "Damn your advice!" Thomas spurred his horse forward, reaching for something in his coat. Several things happened at once. Carter's gun appeared in his hand. Emma stepped forward with the sheriff's sworn statement about the forged deed, and Sarah simply stood her ground, staring her father down with all the strength her mother had given her. Thomas Mitchell's hand fell empty to his side. For the first time, she saw him clearly. A small man, used by bigger men for their own purposes, unable to build anything of his own. "Time to go, Mr. Mitchell," Sheriff Wilson said firmly. "Don't make this worse." The hard-eyed men were already turning their horses, sensing a lost cause. The lawyer remounted awkwardly, adjusting his dusty suit. "This ain't what your mother would have wanted." Thomas tried one last time. "Ma wanted us safe, happy, and honest," Emma replied. "We are. No, thanks to you." They watched the group ride away, their father's shoulders slumped in final defeat. The legal documents that had saved their home rustled in the warm breeze, each one a brick in the foundation of their new life. "Proud of you, girls," Carter said, quietly. Sarah gathered the papers, handling them with the same care she'd once given her mother's Bible. "Proud of us all." The sound of hammering drifted from the barn, where workers were expanding the horse pens for Emma's growing breeding program. The ranch was changing, growing, becoming more than any of them had imagined, just like they had. The yellowed newspaper clipping fluttered from between the pages of their mother's Bible, where it had been hidden for years. Sarah caught it before it could drift to the floor, then wished she hadn't as she read the headline from the Kansas. The City Star, dated 1865, "Bank robbery ends in tragedy. Guard killed in heist gone wrong." Her hands trembled as she scanned the article. There, listed among the suspects, Thomas Mitchell, believed to have served as lookout. Two other names jumped out, the same men who'd been pressing their father's false claim to the ranch. "Sarah," Emma's voice made her jump. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Maybe I have." She handed the clipping to her sister. "Seems Pai was more than just a drunk and a gambler." Emma's face went pale as she read. "A murder? You think Ma knew?" "Must have." Sarah touched their mother's Bible gently. "Must be why she hid money for us, kept such careful records. She knew someday it might all fall apart." The sound of horses outside drew their attention. Carter rode. In with Sheriff Wilson, both men looking grim. "Got news from Cheyenne," the sheriff said once they'd gathered in the kitchen. "Your father's friends? They've been busy. 3 more ranches hit with false claims, all along the railroad survey line." Sarah spread out the newspaper clipping. "Think this explains why?" Carter studied it, his jaw tightening. "The Kansas City job. Heard about it during the war. Never caught all the men involved. Railroads coming through this territory," Sheriff Wilson added. "Land that's worthless today will be worth a fortune once those tracks are laid. And they're using Pa to make false claims," Emma said slowly, "because he knows the area, knows how to make the stories sound believable." Sarah thought of the forged deed, how confident their father had been. "He's done this before, hasn't he? In Kansas City, they must have used forged papers to get into the bank." "Smart girl." Carter's voice held approval. "Been tracking these men since Wyoming. They work the same scheme territory to territory, find a local man down on his luck, use him to establish false claims, then sell the land to the railroad at a premium." "But why you?" Emma asked. "Why target the Circle C specifically?" Carter and the sheriff exchanged looks. Finally Wilson spoke. "Because James here was getting too close. He'd been feeding information to the territorial marshals, helping build a case." The pieces fell into place in Sarah's mind. "That's why you helped us, isn't it? You knew who Pa was mixed up with." "At first," Carter admitted, "but things change." People change. His eyes met hers, and Sarah felt the now familiar warmth in her chest. Yes, things did change. Emma wasn't finished putting it together. So when those men forced Pa to leave town that day at the saloon, they weren't really after him, Sarah finished. They were sending Carter a message, back off or else. Didn't expect him to take in the daughters of one of their own men. Sheriff Wilson shook his head. Complicated things considerably. Complicated ain't always bad, Carter said softly. Another rider approached. Jimmy Watson again, looking worried. Sheriff, telegraph from Cheyenne. Mitchell's gang hit the bank in Medicine Bow. 2 men dead. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Emma gripped her hand hard. They're escalating, Carter said, getting desperate. Railroad survey comes through next week. Wilson stood, settling his gun belt. If they're going to make a big move, it'll be before then. After they left, the sisters sat with the newspaper clipping between them. Their father's role in the Kansas City robbery seemed to poison even their good memories of him. She must have been so afraid, Emma whispered. All those years, knowing what he was, what he might bring to our door. Sarah thought of their mothers. Quiet strength, her careful preparations, her lessons about standing on your own feet. She made sure we'd be stronger than she was, strong enough to survive whatever came. Carter appeared in the doorway. Stage came through. Brought those books. You ordered on horse bloodlines, Emma. And Sarah? Territory Land Office confirmed our partnership papers. Everything's legal and recorded. Such simple things. Books, papers, honest work. The opposite of everything their father had chosen. Sarah tucked the newspaper clipping back into their mother's Bible. Let them come, she said firmly. We're ready. But that night she added extra bullets to her gun belt and saw Emma do the same. Some truths, once learned, couldn't be unlearned. Their father had taught them that, if nothing else. The gun belt lay coiled on Carter's desk like a sleeping snake, its worn leather telling stories of hard use. 2 guns rested in their holsters, Carter's everyday revolver, and a longer-barreled Colt he hadn't carried since his army days. Everyone needs to know their part, he said, addressing the gathered ranch hands. Mitchell's gang won't just be after the ranch now. They'll want to eliminate witnesses. Sarah studied the men's faces as Carter laid out the defense plan. Some had been with him since Wyoming. Others were newer, but all nodded with grim determination. They'd built something worth protecting here. Miss Emma's got the horses ready in the north pasture, Carter continued. Any trouble, that's where the women and children head first. Supply wagons already stocked. We're not running. Sarah's voice was firm. Emma and I stay and fight. Carter's eyes met hers. He didn't argue. He'd learned better by now. Instead, he lifted a 3rd gun from the desk drawer. Was my army sidearm, he said, holding it out to her. Never failed me yet. The weapon felt heavy, solid. Sarah checked it with practiced movements. She'd learned over the past months. Emma already wore her own revolver, a gift from Carter, after she'd proven herself during the storm. Riders coming, Jimmy Watson's voice carried from the yard. About a dozen. From the east. They moved quickly. To their positions. Sarah took her place by the office window, while Emma headed to the barn to guard their precious horses. Carter strapped on his gun belt with fluid grace. Different this time, he said quietly. They're not here to talk papers, Sarah thought. Of the newspaper clipping, the dead bank guard in Kansas City. I know. He touched her shoulder briefly. Your mother raised warriors. No, Sarah managed a smile. She raised survivors. The gang approached slowly, deliberately. Sarah counted 14 riders, led by the hard-eyed men from before. Her father rode with them, but at the back, no longer useful except as a guide. Carter, the lead rider called out. Last chance to sell clean and walk away. Funny, Carter drawled from the porch, was about to offer you boys the same deal. The gang leader laughed, but there was no humor in it. Railroad's coming, Carter. This land's too valuable for your kind now. Time for civilization. Civilization? Emma's voice rang clear from the barn. Is that what you call murder and theft? Sarah saw her father flinch at Emma's words. Good. Let him see what his choices had cost. No one needs to die today, the gang leader said. Just sign over the ranch, forget what you've seen, and ride out. Like that guard in Kansas City? Sarah called out. Did you give him that choice? Surprise flickered across the gang leader's face. Behind him, Thomas Mitchell went pale. Should have taught your girls to keep quiet, the leader snarled at Mitchell. Then, to his men, burn them out. The first shot came from the gang, wild and high. Carter's return fire was deliberate, dropping the shooter from his saddle. Then the air filled with gunsmoke and chaos. Sarah's army colt barked twice, covering Carter as he rolled behind a water trough. Emma's revolver sang out from the barn, protecting their escape route. The ranch hands proved their loyalty, their rifles creating a web of fire that kept the gang from rushing the buildings. Through the smoke, Sarah saw her father trying to slip away. Their eyes met through the window. For a moment, she saw regret in his face, maybe even a flash of pride at what his daughters had become. Then a bullet shattered the glass, forcing her to duck. When she looked again, he was gone. Sarah! Carter's voice cut through the gunfire. Riders from the west. Her heart sank. Reinforcements for the gang, but then she heard Emma whoop with joy from the barn. It's the sheriff and the territorial marshal. The gang, hearing this, started to break. Their leader screamed curses, trying to rally them, but it was too late. Caught between Carter's defenders and the approaching law, they began to surrender. Sarah kept Carter's army colt trained steady until the last man dropped his weapon. The gun belt had served its purpose, protecting what was theirs. But as the smoke cleared, she knew the real fight, the one for their future, was just beginning. They had survived. Now it was time to live. Doc Jenkins' medical kit lay open on the kitchen table, its leather worn smooth by years of emergency calls. Sarah watched him sort through bottles and bandages, his movements quick and sure as he treated the wounded. Hold still, Jenkins muttered, probing the bullet graze on Carter's arm. Damn lucky shot. Wasn't luck. Carter's eyes stayed on Sarah across the room. Had someone watching my back? She managed a tired smile while helping Emma bind a ranch hand's shoulder wound. The kitchen had become a field hospital, smelling of blood and carbolic acid. Through the window, she could see the territorial marshal's men loading prisoners into wagons. 5 of them dead, Sheriff Wilson reported from the doorway. 2 of ours wounded, but they'll live. Mitchell's gang won't trouble anyone else. And our father? Emma asked quietly. No sign. Must have slipped away in the confusion. Sarah nodded, unsurprised. Thomas Mitchell had always been good at disappearing when trouble came calling. Doc Jenkins pulled another roll of bandages from his kit, along with a small bottle of laudanum. Seen enough bullet wounds to last a lifetime. Reminds me of the war. Different kind of war here, Carter said. Fighting for something, not just against. Sarah understood. They hadn't just been defending land. They'd been protecting a future, a home, a family they'd built for themselves. The doctor's instruments gleamed in the lamplight as he stitched and cleaned. Each item in his kit had its purpose, like the people who'd come together to defend the ranch. Emma's gentle touch with the wounded, Carter's steady leadership, Sarah's own surprising strength when it mattered most. Girl's got a good eye, one of the wounded ranch hands said as Emma finished his bandage. Saw her drop 2 of them before they knew where the shots were coming from. Our mother taught us to protect what matters, Emma replied, but her hands shook slightly as she repacked the medical supplies. Sarah moved to her sister's side, understanding. Taking a life, even in defense, left marks on the soul. You did what you had to, she whispered. We all did. The marshal stepped in, his badge catching the light. Mr. Carter, need to talk about Wyoming. Carter tensed, but Sarah touched his arm. No more secrets, she said softly. Time to clear your name properly. He nodded slowly. Reckon you're right. They watched him follow the marshal outside. Doc Jenkins closed his medical kit with a decisive snap. Well, the living will live and the dead will stay dead. Not much more I can do here. Thank you, Doc, Sarah said, pressing payment into his hand. Keep the money. He nodded toward Carter's retreating back. Just take care of him. Man's carried enough weight alone. After Jenkins left, the sisters stood in their kitchen, surveying. The aftermath. Blood-stained bandages, empty bottles, the lingering smell of gun smoke, but underneath it all the familiar sense of home, coffee, fresh bread, hope. "We did it," Emma said wonderingly. "We actually did it." Had help. Sarah smiled, remembering how the whole ranch had come together. Even the town had rallied, once they knew the truth about Mitchell's gang. Sheriff Wilson returned with news that made Emma's eyes light up. During the fight, they'd managed to save all the horses. Not a single one lost to fire or gunfire. "Your sister's training paid off," he told Sarah. "Animals stayed calm through the whole thing. Worth their weight in gold, those horses." Emma glowed with pride, and Sarah saw their future taking shape. The railroad would come, but on their terms. The ranch would grow, but with honest work and clean papers. Carter returned as dusk settled, looking weary but relieved. "Marshall's satisfied. Wyoming case is officially closed." "And our father's friends?" Sarah asked. "Facing charges back to Kansas City. Your father?" He hesitated. "They found his horse, shot clean through. Blood trail leading nowhere. Up to you if you want them to keep looking." The sisters exchanged glances. Their father had made his choices, paid his prices. Perhaps it was better to let the past fade, like old bloodstains washing out of bandages. Doc Jenkins's medical kit had patched their wounds, but time would have to heal the deeper scars. Sarah looked at their defended home, their protected future, and knew it was worth every painful stitch. "We should help the hands clean up," Emma said practically. "Tomorrow's still going to come, battles or no battles." Sarah smiled. Yes, tomorrow would come, and for the first time since their mother died, she truly looked forward to it. The new family portrait sat in pride of place above the mantel, still fresh from the photographer's studio in Cheyenne. Sarah studied it while dusting, such a contrast from the old daguerreotype of their original family. In this one, she and Emma stood tall and confident, Carter between them, all three facing the future together. The ranch house stood proud in the background, its fresh paint gleaming. "Wool gathering?" Emma's voice carried from the doorway. She'd just come in from the corrals, her riding clothes dusty but her face bright with satisfaction. "Just thinking about changes." Sarah smiled at her sister. "Remember how scared we were that first night in the abandoned church? Seems like a lifetime ago." Emma moved to stand beside her, both of them studying the portrait, though some changes are still taking some getting used to. She nodded toward the window, where they could see Carter teaching one of the younger hands how to properly mend tack. The ranch had grown, hiring on more workers to handle the expanding horse operation. "The railroad survey team's coming through next week," Sarah said. "Their agent says our breeding stock will be in high demand once the line's established. Good thing we're ready for them." Emma's voice held pride. "Did you see the offers that came in for our last batch of horses?" Sarah had seen them. Careful bookkeeping showed the ranch's value had nearly doubled since the battle 3 months ago. The Circle C's reputation for quality horseflesh now reached all the way to California. A knock at the door revealed Jimmy Watson, no longer just the sheriff's son, but their official liaison with the town council. "Ladies," he tipped his hat, "town meetings called for tonight, railroad business." "We'll be there," Sarah assured him. The town had changed too, treating the sisters as respected business owners rather than scandal-touched outcasts. After Jimmy left, they went about their daily tasks with practiced ease. Sarah updated the ledgers while Emma worked with a promising new colt. Carter's presence moved through the ranch like a steady heartbeat, keeping everything in rhythm. Late afternoon brought Sheriff Wilson with news. "Thought you should know. They're closing the books on your father's case." Sarah's hands stilled on the ledger. "They're sure. Found enough evidence to confirm it. Died of his wounds that night, buried in a shallow grave up near Crow Creek." The sheriff's voice held gentle certainty. "He's at rest now." After he rode away, Sarah found Emma in the barn. Her sister was brushing down her favorite mare, her movement steady despite the news. "You okay?" Sarah asked softly. Been expecting it. Emma didn't look up. Part of me died with him months ago when we found that newspaper clipping. This is just finishing things. They stood together in the warm barn, surrounded by the comfortable sounds of horses and honest work. Through the door, they could see their new family portrait through the house window, catching the late sun. Ma would be proud, Emma said finally. Not of him, of us. Of all of us, Sarah corrected, as Carter appeared in the barn doorway. He took in their expressions and understood immediately. Heard about your father. If you want to ride out there. No, both sisters said together. Then Sarah added, our place is here. Carter nodded, respecting their choice. Town meeting soon, should get cleaned up. They watched him walk back to the house, his straight spine and steady gait so different from their father's remembered stumbling. You know, Emma said thoughtfully, I think this is what Ma meant in her recipe book, about help coming from unexpected places. Sarah thought of all the changes the past months had brought. The ranch's success. Emma's growing reputation as a horse trainer. Her own blossoming relationship with Carter, built on respect and trust. Speaking of unexpected, she said, Carter asked me something this morning. About making the portrait more official, you might say. Emma's eyes lit up. About time, though you'll have to take a new portrait then. We'll take as many as we need, show the world who we are now. They walked back to the house together, past the fresh-painted walls and new fence posts. The ranch had grown beyond any of their expectations, just as they had grown beyond their old fears and limitations. Inside, the portrait watched over them as they prepared for the town meeting. 3 people who had found each other against all odds, building something stronger than any of them could have managed alone. Family, Sarah thought, not by blood, but by choice. Those were the bonds that truly lasted. The land deed gleamed with fresh ink, the names clear and bold. James Carter, Sarah Mitchell, and Emma Mitchell, joint owners of the Circle C Ranch and all its holdings. Sarah traced their names with a gentle finger, remembering another deed. The forged one that had started all this. Quite a difference, Carter said quietly, coming up behind her. Both in the paper and the people reading it. They stood in the bank president's office, the afternoon sun streaming through tall windows. Emma was outside, talking with the railroad surveyors about the new spur line that would run near their property. Makes it real, Sarah said, though it's felt real for a while now. Speaking of real, Carter shifted, uncharacteristically nervous. Been carrying something around, waiting for the right time. He pulled a small box from his coat pocket, and Sarah's heart skipped. But before he could open it, the bank door burst open. Mr. Carter! Jimmy Watson stood breathless in the doorway. Riders coming in. Say they're from your old unit. Army men. Carter's hand dropped from the box. How many? 6. Led by a Colonel Harrison. Sarah saw recognition flash across Carter's face. My old commanding officer, the one who helped clear my name in Wyoming. They hurried outside where Emma had already greeted the riders. Colonel Harrison proved to be a distinguished man in his 50s, his uniform immaculate despite trail dust. James Carter, he called out warmly. Still keeping the peace in your own way, I hear. Try to, sir. Carter shook his old commander's hand. What brings you out here? Railroad business, partially. But also, Harrison's face grew serious. Wanted to tell you in person. We found the last of them, the men who framed you in Wyoming. Sarah felt Carter tense beside her. The Wyoming incident had been cleared from his record, but the men behind it had escaped justice. Until now. They talked? Carter asked quietly. Harrison nodded. Full confession. Your name's not just cleared now. It's vindicated. Treasury. Department's even talking about a commendation for your undercover work. Emma moved closer to her sister as they watched the men talk. Another piece of the past, put to rest, she murmured. Sarah thought of their own past, their father's crimes, their mother's quiet strength, their journey from homeless girls to respected ranchers. Seems to be the season for it. Colonel Harrison turned to the sisters. You must be the Mitchell. And girls, your reputation precedes you, both the horse breeding and the way you handled Mitchell's gang. We had help, Emma said, glancing at Carter. Family helps family, Harrison said knowingly. Then to Carter. Speaking of which, that offer to return to the army still stands. Could use a man like you. Sarah's heart caught, but Carter's response was immediate. Thank you, sir, but my place is here. Got something better than any command. His hand found Sarah's, warm and sure. The deed in her pocket crinkled slightly as she squeezed his fingers. Later, after the army men had gone to their hotel, the three of them sat on the ranch house porch watching the sunset. Emma was reviewing the railroad's offers, while Sarah and Carter sat closer than strictly proper. Quite a day, Emma observed. New deed, army vindication, railroad contracts. And one thing left undone, Carter said. He pulled out the box again, this time managing to open it. Inside sat a simple gold ring. Sarah Mitchell, reckon it's time to make this family official, if you're willing. Sarah looked at the ring, then at Emma's beaming face, then at the deed that proved how far they'd come. One condition, she said. Carter raised an eyebrow. Ring goes on after the cattle drive. Can't have a proper wedding until the work's done. He laughed. The sound. Carrying across their land. Practical woman. One of the many reasons I love you. Emma made a show of studying her railroad papers. Don't mind me, just the sister who saw this coming months ago. The deed, the ring, the railroad contracts, all of them symbols of their new life, their redemption from the shadows of the past. Sarah leaned against Carter's shoulder, feeling the strength they'd built together. Yes, she said simply, though you should know you're getting two sisters in this deal. Wouldn't have it any other way. Carter's voice held the same quiet certainty he'd shown the day he first offered them work. Family's family, the sun, set over their ranch, their home, their future. In her pocket, the deed reminded Sarah of everything they'd fought for, but here, in this moment, she finally felt the last walls around her heart come down. They were home, they were safe, they were loved. The wedding ring caught the morning light, its simple gold band reflecting the sunrise. Sarah stood at her bedroom window, watching the ranch come alive below. The cattle drive had returned successfully. The railroad spur was nearly complete, and today she would marry James Carter. Ready? Emma entered with their mother's Bible, now wrapped in fresh silk. Found something inside you should see. A pressed flower fell from between the pages, a prairie rose, still holding its color after all these years. A note in their mother's handwriting accompanied it. For my daughter's wedding days, love finds a way. She knew. Sarah whispered. Even then, she knew we'd find our way. She'd be proud. Emma tucked the flower into Sarah's bouquet. Not just of this day, but of everything we've built. Through the window, they could see Carter directing the final preparations. The entire town would attend, not out of scandal or curiosity now, but out of genuine respect and friendship. The Circle C Ranch had become a cornerstone of the community. Miss Emma, a ranch hand called from below. That army horse buyer's here early. Go, Sarah laughed. Can't neglect business even today. Emma hesitated. But your wedding is hours away. Besides, Sarah smiled, you built this horse business. It's as much your day as mine. Watching. Her sister stride confidently toward the corrals. Sarah remembered the scared girls they'd been just a year ago. Now Emma was known territory-wide for her horse sense, with buyers coming from as far as California. Sarah touched the ring Carter had given her, remembering his words when he'd proposed. Not just asking her to be his wife, but offering to build something greater together, a true family, a legacy of their own. A knock at the door revealed Sheriff Wilson. Got something for you, Mrs. Carter-to-be. He handed her a telegram. The past message was simple. Thomas Mitchell's grave found. Stop full military pension and back pay recovered. Stop funds forwarded to daughters. Stop Colonel Harrison. Sarah sat down slowly, one final gift from their father. Not the money, but the closure. The last shadow lifted from their new beginning. You all right? The sheriff asked kindly. Better than all right. She tucked the telegram away. The past is finally past. The morning flew by in a blur of preparation. Emma returned glowing from her horse sale. The army had bought their entire spring crop. Carter's old unit members arrived in full dress uniform. The town's children scattered flower petals along the pathways. Before the ceremony, Sarah stood, in her mother's renewed bedroom, now her own. The old daguerreotype sat beside the new family portrait, bridges between past and future. She picked up her mother's Bible, feeling its familiar weight. "Ready, big sister?" Emma appeared in her finest dress, eyes bright with tears and joy. "Look at us," Sarah said softly. "Who'd have thought that night in the abandoned church?" "I did," Carter's voice came from the doorway. He wasn't supposed to see her yet, but Sarah couldn't mind. Knew it the moment you faced down your father in the street. Knew what kind of woman you were. "We shouldn't break tradition," Emma protested, but she was smiling. "Already broke every other kind," Carter said. "Why stop now?" The ceremony itself passed in a happy haze. Sarah would later remember moments like snapshots, Emma's proud tears, Carter's steady hands placing the ring, the cheers of their gathered community. The ring settled on her finger like it had always belonged there, but it was during the celebration, that her favorite moment came. She found Emma by the corrals, watching the sunset paint the sky in wedding colors. "Happy?" her sister asked. "Beyond happy," Sarah touched her ring. "But you know what makes it perfect? That we did it our way. Built our own home, our own family." Speaking of family, Emma's eyes danced. "That army colonel who bought our horses made me an interesting offer. Want me to train horses for the cavalry, build my own breeding program." "You're leaving?" Sarah's heart caught. "Not leaving, expanding. There's that north pasture, remember? Perfect spot for a second ranch house. If you and James don't mind a neighbor." Sarah hugged her sister hard. The ring pressed between them, a symbol not just of marriage, but of all they'd created here. Home, family, purpose, love. The sun set. On their wedding day, painting the Circle C ranch in shades of promise. From humble beginnings, they'd built something extraordinary, not just a ranch, but a legacy, not just a home, but a future. The wedding ring gleamed in the final light, its simple circle reflecting everything they'd fought for, everything they'd won. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, new joys, and they would face them together, as they always had, as they always would.